Welcome to Life Isn't Lived on a Spreadsheet with Ryan Poterack from Poterack Capital Advisory. You have unique values, objectives, fears, life experiences, and biases. Any financial professional who ignores or minimizes the importance of your story may not be able to help you achieve your ideal outcomes or hit your goals. It's time to experience the PCA difference. In this podcast, we help business executives, soon-to-be retirees, and solutions-based individuals overcome the anxiety leading up to their upcoming years. We do this by initiating in-depth discussions about the financial aspects of retirement, like tax planning and asset allocation, alongside, and often overlooked, personal and lifestyle aspects. Join us for this journey where we explore retirement from a contrarian point of view, as Ryan draws from years of experience and qualified guest professionals to help you explore the true purpose of your money in retirement and the impact you want to make in your golden years. Investment advice offered through Private Advisor Group, a registered investment advisor. Private Advisor Group and Poterack Capital Advisory are separate entities. This information is not intended to be a substitute for individualized legal or tax advice. Please consult your legal or tax advisor regarding your specific situation.
How much and how do you get paid? That can be an uncomfortable question for most people to ask anyone, including a financial advisor they might be interviewing. Welcome back to Life Isn't Lived on a Spreadsheet. Your host, Ryan Poterack, is with me, Patrice Sikora. And Ryan, I would venture to guess most people don't know how their financial advisor gets paid. And even when they do ask, they don't understand the answer.
Hi, Patrice. Yeah, I would agree with that. I would, in terms of most being at least 51%, I would absolutely agree with that. And, with your intro, I don't think as consumers, we're hesitant at all to ask what things cost or to look at a tag, but that is a little bit different than asking somebody, how are they paid? And so I can see that is a difference, but typically as a consumer of any product or service, we do want to know what we're having to pay for it. And in the financial industry, it can be more mysterious than it should be, in my view.
That's a really good point you make. Maybe when we look at something, we don't have to ask anyone. We're not being personal. We're just looking at a piece of paper or a menu or something like that. And I think, it's like, then you're right. It's like, oh, that's too much. I can't do that. Oh, that's a bargain. Give me that one. But if I have to ask somebody, I might think twice about it. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. When I get acquainted with somebody initially, so they're not a client, just, maybe a prospective client, I always ask them, if they have an advisor, how do you pay your advisor? And it is not unusual for the person to say, I don't know, or suggest that it's nothing. I think
no, you're kidding.
Yeah, I think in my view on that is there's a lot of financial products, especially in the commission-based world of the industry versus my world of fee-based. The commission-based world, there's a lot of compensation or commissions that are embedded in products. But even when there's not commissions embedded in products, every mutual fund on the planet, every exchange traded fund on the planet has internal fees and expenses. Mm-hmm. They all do. However, it would be incredibly rare for a consumer to see what those expenses are on their brokerage account statement. It's more typically, and it can range wildly. It can be from 0.1% to even 2% annually of expenses that are embedded in a mutual fund, for example, just to use that as our audience would be very familiar with what mutual funds are. And so what that is, let's say a mutual fund has 1% annually in internal expense. If the actual investments in the mutual fund earn 10%, then what the client would see as earnings or growth, if they did the math, is they made 9%. Mm-hmm. Now, and of course, nothing wrong with 9%. However, the client wouldn't likely know that the investments made 10 and the internal cost was 1% because they wouldn't see that as a minus on their statement. If they had 100%, 10% is 10 grand. They wouldn't see, I made 10 grand. Here's $1,000 in mutual fund fees.
Right.
It would just show that they made they made $9,000. And so where a consumer would access that information, and it's made readily available, with my tongue firmly in cheek, by when the consumer receives a prospectus. And the prospectus, typically, quarter-inch thick. By law, an investor must receive a prospectus on any investment, stocks, mutual funds, or what have you. But it's kind of like the owner's manual of the mutual fund, to stick with the same example, but it is very difficult to read and understand. And even if somebody is looking right at the information, or I'll call it the chapter that speaks to fees and compensation, it's oftentimes in industry jargon that's just not familiar to the consumer.
I was going to say, they are not written in English, Ryan. I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah.
I have honestly tried to plow through a few of them, and that's what it is. First of all, as you say, you've got to find the portion that really is of interest to you. And I have to admit, I had a book out looking, what does this mean? What does this mean? And I'm still not sure I totally understood it.
Yeah, and it is still a relationship business by and large. And so what gets to owning any financial investment is typically the individual working with an advisor, and even the individual, because they might not ask, they might have no idea if the particular financial professional is being paid a commission, is working on fees. It's just, there is an awkwardness, as you said in your intro, which what we've done, what I've seen that as an opportunity. And so in an initial phone call with somebody that I've never previously met, whether they're introduced by my best client, my mom, or just out of the blue, is I get into this discussion of fees and expenses, just straight on. And I lead with education, because the fact that so many people fit the description that you gave in the intro, not sure what they're paying and how much they're paying. That's where I've seen it as an opportunity to just be forthright and candid. And I believe it works for us at PCA.
Ryan, you said you are fee-based. What does that mean?
Well, great question. Fee-based really is one of two different compensation models. One's not better than the other. It's just what situation fits. The two ways that in my practice that I can be compensated, sometimes people pay me for what I know and the time to share it with them. And so that would be similar to an attorney, possibly a CPA model, where they don't have any accounts with us. They're simply paying me a fee to do some planning, to review their portfolio, to take a look at different charitable giving strategies, that sort of thing. So there's no conflict of interest around selling or buying different products or transactions. They just pay me for my time. And the other model that is fee-based, and pretty common in the industry for firms that are fee-based, is on a quarterly basis. Well, typically, there would be an agreed upon percentage, an annual percentage that the client would agree to compensate my firm for managing their money. And it can incorporate a lot of advice and other things that go along with that. But just for the sake of discussion with easy numbers here for our audience, let's say the agreed upon fee percentage was 1% annually. What that means is that at the end of each calendar quarter, so September 30th, as an example, the dollar value of all of the accounts that I'm being asked to manage in a household are multiplied times 1/4 of 1%. So dollar value times 1/4 of the annual percentage results in a dollar amount. And that's what the advisor, or in this case, that's what we are compensated. In that scenario, it's completely transparent, because our client would see on their statement investment advisor fee, X number of dollars. Additionally, that is the entirety of the compensation that our client is paying my firm. There's no connection to transactions. So our fee, our revenue doesn't go up or down based on the particular stock or the particular fund or what chosen investments. And when you compensate an advisor based on your account value, as this fee-based scenario I'm explaining, then there's no difference between what your financial professional wants and what you as a client want. Everybody wants larger account values.
Absolutely. Now, you sent me something here that is a little disturbing. Research shows 45% of wealth management clients don't trust their advisors to charge them fairly.
Well, I mean, in a survey, so you and I substantially agreed at the outset that the majority, thus more than 50%, really have no idea how the advisor is paid. And I guess, not to quibble, but I do with language, not trusting might not mean that the client is thinking nefarious thoughts, but when you're talking about money, that's a very personal thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can be, and also a client or a consumer knows that the other party, the financial professional, is getting compensated. So if I'm the consumer or the client and I know the advisor I'm working with is getting compensated, but I don't have a handle on how much and what are the metrics, it's in a gray area that makes me uncomfortable. And if I'm uncomfortable and my advisor hasn't proactively shared it or assured that I'm very, very clear as their client how they're paid, I can see where that would be sowing seeds of distrust.
Sure.
Somewhere in there. I mean, just kind of putting my psychology hat on here. I think that's what would drive that result, because then you get an independent survey. The advisor's not in the room or in the headspace of the person answering the survey. And they're like, well, I don't know.
So what are some questions people can ask their wealth manager to better understand what they're paying?
Well, we've kind of plowed this ground a bit, but to maybe be at the risk of being too simple is, how are you paid? How are you compensated? That's very straightforward, because there's a couple of benefits when you ask that question, in my view, of a financial professional. How are you compensated, or how would I pay you, is literally the answer of, how they're paid, but also you get to witness how forthright they might be. Do they start squirming? Do they start double talking and all that sort of thing? It's not that complicated intellectually. There has been, I just think, over the decades of the industry. And by the way, in this general topic we're discussing, Patrice, today, it is getting a lot better over the past few decades. In part, I think, because the internet and disclose, it's just easier to research and hold people accountable if you choose to. But simply asking the financial professional, how are you compensated? Are there situations where you would receive more compensation for a particular strategy over another?
Mm-hmm.
And in an ideal situation between a professional and a client, and this is tax, legal, doesn't matter what industry, the person asking, the client, should be comfortable in asking those questions. Or if they're not comfortable in asking the question initially, the professional should very quickly make them feel comfortable.
And that's my next question. Who should really be either asking the question or offering the information? Should the information come first?
Well, that's certainly how we do it at Poterack Capital Advisory. That's where I saw the opportunities. We're going to lead right away. I know it's mysterious to the public. And so I'm going to err on the side of immediately going there in the first probably 15 to 20 minutes of an initial conversation with somebody that I've not previously met, and then have the client say, okay, yeah, that's the way I've worked with an advisor before, or whatever. I don't want to make any assumptions. So I really think it's much more on the professional's plate to make that readily available and make that a comfortable conversation. Now, there's also, I guess, in business, caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. I don't think that's a sustainable way of doing business and developing good relationships. But I don't think that the client or the consumer is blameless. But I think there's much more heavy weight on the professional to make that easy information, not putting it on the consumer to have to read a prospectus or research things or figure out industry lingo.
Or to just dig deep and find the courage to say, all right, so how are you getting paid anyway?
Yeah, Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I think leading with it, it just removes that. I mean, it's almost like I can hear an audible sigh and, oh, okay. Yeah. In that area. Patrice, I do want to interject one thing here, because very rarely in life, in any kind of consumer decision, since I kind of relate that, we're getting specific to my industry, and then I like to widen the lens.
Mm-hmm.
Going about making a decision by buying the cheapest is usually an unhappy road. Understanding fees and expenses are a good thing, but the lowest fees and expenses are not the best thing in and of themselves. If everything else is equal, all of us would rather pay less for the shirt, the pair of shoes, the book that we like, and for good advice. But I just caution our audience to not get too myopic around fees and expenses. Make sure they're disclosed, make sure you actually understand them, but it is really about value. And when we buy a car, a house, or just about any consumer decision, it's really the value. It's not going about buying the least expensive under all circumstances.
That is spot on. And the relationship that comes after being honest with each other can really solidify whatever you have going forward.
Indeed. Yeah. And that's also challenging, because the value at the outset, and for our listeners, some of which maybe they're working with professionals or not, the difference oftentimes, if not exclusively, has to be experienced. Mm-hmm. And so for those in the audience hearing my words and thinking, oh, that doesn't sound much different than the story I've heard from others, I get it. I totally get it. But you don't know the responsiveness, the reasoning, the thoughtful advice, the demeanor, even like the bedside manner of a physician, until you're actually working with that professional and their team and that firm over time. And that's the real challenge for consumers up front, is they do their best. They make a decision to go with somebody for whatever those reasons are, but it's probably going to take months, if not years, to figure out, is this working for me or is this not working for me?
Well, Ryan, how can people reach you so they can find out if you are the right person for them?
Well, we're not tough. We're not that tough to get a hold of, Patrice. They can call our phone number at 704-366-5776. They can go to our website, www.poterack.net. That's POTERACK.net. We're out there on LinkedIn, Twitter, well, X now, and Facebook as well. So if anyone would like to get acquainted or learn more about this subject or any other, just get in touch with us.
Fantastic. And listener, don't miss any episode of Life Isn't Lived on a Spreadsheet. All you have to do is follow or subscribe and share with friends. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for listening to Life Isn't Lived on a Spreadsheet. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. To ask questions about topics covered during the show, or get a copy of Making It Count, Life Isn't Lived on a Spreadsheet by Ryan Poterack, visit www.poterack.net or give us a call at 704-366-5776. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Poterack Capital Advisory. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. Poterack Capital Advisory does not offer legal or tax advice. Please consult the appropriate professional regarding your individual circumstances. Nothing contained herein is to be considered a solicitation, research material, an investment recommendation, or advice of any kind. The information contained herein may contain information that is subject to change without notice. Any investments or strategies referenced herein do not take into account the investment objectives, financial situation, or particular needs of any specific person.
Product sustainability must be independently determined for each individual investor. Poterack Capital Advisory explicitly disclaims any responsibility for product suitability or suitability determinations related to individual investors.